Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the pretty shadowy side of the housing market, mortgage fraud. And look, we're not talking about a home buyer maybe stretching the truth a little bit on their application. No, we're talking about something much bigger, a scheme called fraud for profit, where the very professionals you're supposed to trust are the ones rigging the entire game.
And that question right there gets to the absolute heart of it. The whole system for buying a home is built on a foundation of trust. So what happens when that trust is broken? When your guide is actually the one leading you and the whole system off a cliff? Well, the fallout can be massive.
So, here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to meet these architects of deceit. Then, we'll see how they build these fictitious foundations and, manipulate the math. We'll also get into how they exploit loopholes and people, and maybe most importantly, we'll talk about how you can stay safe and informed through all of this.
All right, let's get right into it. In this first part, we're going to really define what we're talking about and get to know the key players behind these really damaging schemes. Okay, first things first, let's meet the main character in this whole drama, the Mortgage Loan Originator, or MLO for short. This is the professional, the person who's supposed to be your trusted guide, holding your hand through what is, let's be honest, a super complex process.
And here we have the central problem, fraud for profit. Now this is crucial. This is not about a buyer trying to get into a home they can't quite afford. No, this is about industry insiders deliberately blowing up the lending process just so they can skim cash for themselves. The goal isn't a house, it's just cold, hard cash.
Okay, moving on. Let's see how this actually works. Some of the most, well, frankly, audacious schemes are literally built on nothing. They're built out of thin air.
So, a real classic in the fraud playbook is using what's called a straw buyer. Think of it like this. The fraudster basically hires an actor, someone with good credit, to pretend to be the home buyer. This person, the straw buyer, has zero intention of ever living in that house or making a single payment. They're just a clean name, a front, to hide the real criminals orchestrating the whole thing.
And if you thought that was bold, it gets even crazier with something called an air loan. The name says it all, really. It's a loan created out of thin air. We're talking about a loan for a property that doesn't exist, a borrower who's completely made up, or sometimes both. It's a mortgage on a ghost house. So let's just break that down, because the distinction is pretty important. With a straw buyer, you've got a real person. They just have a fake purpose. But with an air loan, everything, and I mean everything, the person, the property, it's all completely made up, pure fiction.
All right, next up, we're going to look at frauds that don't just invent reality, but instead, they take existing facts and just twist them and manipulate them. This is all about cooking the books, where the numbers they don't add up.
A perfect example of this is the illegal property flip. It sounds complex, but it's really a simple four-step con. The conspirators buy a property. Then they get a corrupt appraiser to say it's worth way more than it is. They quickly resell it at that fake, inflated price, and boom, they and the appraiser just split the difference. That one bogus number from the appraisal is the linchpin for the whole scam.
So when you look at these manipulation schemes, they really just boil down to two big lies. Lie number one is appraisal fraud. You lie about what the property is worth. And lie number two is income and employment fraud. You lie about what the borrower can actually afford, creating phony pay stubs and job histories.
Now, our final category of fraud. This is where things get even more cynical. It moves beyond simple lies and into schemes that are all about exploiting weaknesses in the system and, tragically, preying on vulnerable people.
So a couple of common ways they game the system are through occupancy fraud. That's just lying and saying you're going to live in an investment property to get a better interest rate. And something called a silent second. That's where a borrower takes out a second, hidden loan for the down payment, which tricks the main lender into thinking the buyer has way more skin in the game than they actually do.
But one of the most complex, high-stakes scams out there is called shotgunning. I mean, it's a real race against the clock, and it all starts with just one single, legitimate property.
So here's how the race works. The fraudster takes that one property and applies for a bunch of different loans from different lenders, all at the exact same time. The goal is to get all the loan money in hand before any of the lenders can file their official claim on the property. That's called a lien. If they're fast enough, they can vanish with all that cash before the public records catch up and the whole scam is revealed.
And this brings us to what are maybe the most predatory schemes of all, the ones that target people who are already in financial trouble. They come in with what the source material calls false promises of saving their homes. But the real goal is just having the homeowners sign over the deed. It's disguised as a rescue, but it's actually a robbery.
Okay, so after hearing about all of these pretty terrifying schemes, the most important question has to be, how do you protect yourself? How do you arm yourself with the right information to stay safe?
So where can you go? Well, the source material points us towards some really solid government resources. We're talking about agencies like the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the Federal Housing Finance Agency. These aren't just rule makers. They actually provide information and guides to help everyday people spot the red flags and protect themselves from exactly these kinds of scams.
And all of this leaves us with one final, really important question to think about. When it's the insiders, the very people who are supposed to be managing the system, who are committing the fraud, who do you think ultimately pays the price for it all?